in participating in this webinar today on the role of digital trade standards in inclusive digital trade in ASEAN. My name is Kajun, and on behalf of Access Partnership and RMIT, a warm welcome. This workshop is a part of the series of workshops that the Digital Trade Standard Initiative has been having over the past few years. And we're happy to bring to you today the topic that's very closely important to ASEAN. And before I proceed with the session today, let me just quickly run through a few housekeeping and introduction. So your mic and camera will be turned off by default. Please use the chat function throughout the session to leave any question, comment, and we welcome your participation throughout the session. And lastly, the session will be recorded. There's a Q&A session specifically towards the end too. If you would like to make any comments, please do use the raise hand function as well. If time permits, we'll get to you there. And so today we have a very distinguished set of panelists with us today to share their insight and expertise on the subject of digital trade standard in inclusive digital trade for ASEAN. But before I hand it over to them, let me first invite Dr. Kirill Artyukov, the first Secretary of Economics from Australia mission to ASEAN, to give his opening remarks. The floor is yours, Dr. Kirill.
Thank you, Karjun, and good afternoon and welcome to all speakers, distinguished guests, and participants. My name is Kirill Artyukov. I'm a First Secretary Economic working at the Australian Mission to ASEAN, based here in Jakarta. I wish to acknowledge the support and cooperation of all members of the Digital Trade Standards and Conformance Working Group and the ASEAN Consultative Committee for Standards and Quality in their support for the Digital Trade Standards Initiative. It is a pleasure to be here and appreciate your presence virtually from various locations to join this workshop on the role of digital trade standards in inclusive digital trade in the region. In the introduction, I would like to say a few words on the Australian government's policy and efforts to promote inclusive digital trade in the region. And the first thing that comes to mind is the upgraded ASEAN-Australia and New Zealand Free Trade Agreement that was signed in August 2023. And the upgraded NCTA will deliver value-added elements, including new chapters and provisions on micro, small and medium enterprises or MSMEs, also on sustainable development and trade. It will incorporate enhanced provisions on e-commerce, competition, trade and services, and investment. Also, additionally, our commitment to regional economic growth is outlined in the Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040, which was launched in the region last year in September 2023 by our Prime Minister. This strategy seeks to ensure we are jointly positioned to maximize the potential of our economic ties. It sets concrete practical pathways to increase links in priority sectors, and this includes digital economy. In particular, one of the recommendations is on working with ASEAN partners to expand coverage of digital trade rules and standards, promoting interoperability through digital trade rules, negotiations, advocacy, and capacity building. And that's pretty much what Digital Trade Standards Initiative is all about. As a comprehensive strategic partner, Australia is committed to supporting regional economic integration and sustaining the momentum that has been achieved over the past several years to enable greater level of digital trade development in ASEAN. And specifically with respect to the role of MSMEs, unlocking the full growth potential of the region requires making digital trade more accessible to MSMEs. We are entering a transformative era when digital trade is no longer just an option, but a necessity. As we navigate through this digital revolution, it is an imperative that we recognize the critical role of leveling the playing field and greater inclusion of MSMEs and economic activities. So it's not just big businesses that take full benefits of digital revolution. So the inclusion of this inclusion is the bedrock upon which a more inclusive and prosperous economic community can be built. And this includes addressing the digital gender divide. As SMEs seeks to digitalize their businesses, strategic adoption of digital trade standards across the community is critical to ensuring their active participation in regional and global trade. Standards provide a set of rules that can bring about safe, cost-effective, and integrated business practices that resonate across borders. In conclusion, I would like to say that Australia, through its partnership with ASEAN, is fully committed to supporting the development and the harmonization of digital trade standards. Together, we can foster an environment where digital trade becomes a catalyst for innovation, competitiveness, and economic growth. And we look forward to a valuable discussion with the distinguished participants and speakers today. Thank you for having me, and I will now pass back to Access Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kirill. Before I start my presentation, maybe I request Laura Benjamin to switch on your camera so we can take a group photo, and Dr. Kirill as well, if you could just join us for a quick photo.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Sorry, one sec. Kevin, I believe Ricky is also here. Can you give him access,
Yep.
speaker access, so he could join
Yeah,
the stage
okay.
as well?
1 second, sorry. Which has his account been given the presenter rights? Sorry. Yes, he has.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vicky, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, could you switch on your camera? We're
most
just trying to
likely-
take a group. We're trying to take a group photo. So if you could just switch on your camera.
Okay then.
Rajan, let me know when it's done.
3, 2, 1. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to do this webinar and to share our knowledge. Before we go into the panel discussion, I have a short deck. I just wanted to talk about some aspects about the different areas of work that we have been doing on digital trades. For example, we did a study with APAC on economic impact of adopting digital trade rules. Also on the digital trade standards, how inclusive digital trade is important. So based on that, we just wanted to bring together the different knowledge pieces and to share those with you today. And following that, we will head into a panel where we will give everybody an opportunity to also ask questions. And as Karjun said, feel free to send your questions in the chat function. Karjun, if you go to the next slide. So the first challenge we always had when we talk about digital trade is how do you even define digital trade? There are a lot of different ways people have looked at it. As for this particular aspect, we are looking at the OECD, WTO, IMF handbooks. As you can imagine, so many people had to come together to just define what digital trade is. So essentially, it defines digital trade in two different axes. One is what is the product that is being traded? Is it goods? Is it services? Same as merchant as typical trade, right? You have goods trade, you have services trade. But interestingly, what you also look at from a digital perspective is the nature of the trade. Was the good or services digitally ordered? Was it digitally delivered? Or was it both digitally ordered and digitally delivered? So there could be different things. For example, if you think from an e-commerce perspective, you might order something digitally, or even on your food delivery, you might order it digitally, but the delivery is not digital, right? On the other aspect, sometimes you might just order something which is in person, but you get a receipt, for example, or you get something online. say movie tickets, for example, a lot of times they are digitally delivered to us these days. And a lot of the things are digitally ordered and digitally delivered. Financial services, for example, professional services, audit, for example, a lot of those are happening there in that sense. So that's how they are typically defined. A lot of the issue is that the transactions are included in existing trade statistics, but the challenge is since they are not visible to all of us, you can't really, count the number of things. There are several challenges to record them. And we typically try to look at two components. So there's component one, which is trade in digitally ordered groups, goods and services. For example, your e-commerce, wallets, booking a hotel stay. It could be trade in digital content, for example, music, games, we talked about. And component two, which is trade in digitally deliverable services. I talked about financial services. I talked about telecom services. We hardly go to a telecom exchange these days. Everything is done digitally, right? So that's how we sort of define digital trade. It could be good or services, but it has to be either digitally ordered or digitally delivered, or both digitally ordered and delivered. So that solves the problem about how do you define it. So move to the next slide. The interesting fact was when we look at APEC, which is the 21 economies, includes most of ASEAN, includes obviously US, LATAM, China as well. The thing is about digital trade is that it grew faster in APEC as compared to the conventional trade. So if you look at the growth rate, for example, digitally services, so commercial services growth rate is much smaller as compared to, so they grew at 6.3% CAGR, which is a cumulative annual growth rate of 6.3 for the normal commercial services, whereas for digitally delivered services, they grew at a CAGR of 7.8% per annum, right? So you will see that they grew much faster. Two, their share of total services, total trade also became much larger. They used to be 1/4 of the trade. Today, they are like almost 1/3 of the trade. So that's got significantly changed. So digital trade is very, very critical because it's A, growing faster, B, is becoming more critical and more visible everywhere, if you put it that way. Next slide is, if you look at, does it create value? Obviously, it creates value. If you look at the direct impact, which is directly from a digital trade perspective, indirect impact would be those from a supply chain perspective. And then the induced impact is by workers. So if you are working in a digital trade industry and then you spend money on other sectors, you look at all of that, you're talking about close to $2.1 trillion of GDP contribution and over 60 million jobs created across those 21 markets in APEC. Again, massive contribution. And the fact remains that this is still growing. This is data as of 2018. Obviously, this has grown significantly since then. We chose 2018 because that was the most available data for all the 21 markets at that time. This is just, we did this study last year. Now, if you look at the next one, digital trade, obviously, as I mentioned, they contribute to economic growth. They help you expand export markets. They facilitate competition. They enable productivity growth. Again, there are obviously different features. From a production perspective, from a transaction perspective, and there are those different channels of impact, which actually at the end leads to increase in factor accumulation, that you have better knowledge amongst your workers, you have better utilization of those workers, you have better use of your capital. But also it increases the productivity. So for example, if let's say give an example of a restaurant is, if it's just waits for customers to come in, it can do X number of transactions a day. But because you have digitally enabled them on many different apps available these days, you are now doing X plus plus, right? So there are more transactions, which basically means with the same set of inputs, you are able to maximize your productivity. Your table turns are much higher. Your number of dishes going out, your cooking staff is much better involved. So just a simple example of how you can see digital trade impacts economic growth. And that's what I talked about, close to 2.1 trillion in GDP USD and close to 60 million jobs in those 21 markets. One challenge is, we talked about APEC. Now, APEC is a big group. It includes developed markets, US, for example, China, for example, and it includes a lot of developing markets, including a lot of ASEAN countries. The challenge is MSMEs in ASEAN, they are missing out on the full potential of digital trade. Obviously, a big challenge is digitalization gap. MSMEs only account for 18% of our exports in the region, right? You look at developed markets, they have 36% MSME. In terms of GDP contribution, we are smaller for MSME, but even in exports, we are even much smaller. So for every $1 of export in contribution, which MSMEs in emerging markets do, for the developed markets, they do twice that much, right? And a lot of companies are telling us that there are opportunities from digital integration, they can advance digital trade, but a lot of them are not using digital technologies. Multiple reasons, right? Lack of awareness, not able to do full integration, financial issues, sometimes even scaling issues. So it could be a lot of issues why they are not able to do some of these integration. On the next slide, again, why? What are the things? What are some of the measures? And that's where digital trade standards become critical, is that they provide a common framework for rules in which digital solutions are safe, secure, and compliant, so that they can be easily scaled by MSMEs, right? One of the big challenge for MSMEs is they don't have the capacity to ensure everything is working right in the order to make everything possible, right? So they rely a lot on digital trade standards. And they basically look at standards which are compliant, standards compliant with digital technology and solution effectively help to increase consumer trust. So consumers know that I can transact with this company because there is a standard around that. Lower market entry barriers. It's not market dependent. You can have the similar standards across the world. Something like what electronic goods, for example, have. Reduce transaction costs because I don't have to comply with 20 different things. I just have one global digital standards, for example. Reduce cross-border trade cost, again, similar because it makes everything seamless. And more importantly, it enables business environment for your MSMEs to grow in different markets. It also enables a lot more foreign investment because they know that these MSMEs are compliant with the global standards or with the digital trade standards. Yeah. And again, across ASEAN, there is collaboration. We have found obviously successes in incorporating digital trade standards into national policies, into government offered digital solutions. There are, for example, standards by default. Singapore has a nationwide e-invoicing initiative. Indonesia has the quick response standard, which is the go-to standard in Indonesia. We'll hear some of that from Vicky later. There is principles about ease of access. So it needs to be even if you have a standard, the fact that MSMEs are not able to use sometimes is because it's so complicated to use. So the idea is that you need to ensure that it's easy to access for MSMEs. So whether it's the ready solution providers, list of vendors that's being provided. And then it's not enough. You have to have standards. You need to ensure they're easy, but you still need to ensure that there is some support for MSMEs to adopt those standards. So Malaysian example, and we'll hear some of that from Laura. So we have, and you will see later, we have all of these great speakers who will talk about Benjamin from the Singapore perspective, Vicky from the Indonesian perspective, Laura from the Malaysian perspective, to talk about how these principles help a lot for MSMEs to actually adopt some of these standards. Yeah. So with that, I would like to introduce the panel today, and I'll open it for them. What we'll do is we'll obviously ask each one of them to give a short introduction and short presentation. But let me just introduce the panelists first. First is Laura Ho, who serves as a director of digital trade ecosystem at Malaysia's Digital Economy Corporation, MDEC, basically. She has over 20 years of experience in policy, regulatory, and legal matters. So she has done a lot of work around cyber laws, intellectual property, cross-border trade facilitation. But in her current role, she leads Malaysia's overall strategy coordination and implementation of national e-commerce strategic roadmap. She also advises and participates in trade negotiations relating to e-commerce and digital trade at international and regional levels, including at WTO, including at RCEP, ASEAN, and we heard about the WTO definition of digital trade. So Laura, welcome to the panel. Maybe if you can open your camera, switch on your camera. Next, we have Benjamin. Benjamin is an executive director for Association of Trade and Commerce in Singapore. He has over 10 years of experience in the field of business and IT sector, focusing on digital transformation, development of enterprises. And he's been a strong advocate for digitalization and also uplifting the competitiveness of local MSMEs in the country. He has initiated multiple programs, industry engagement. I talked about why some of those are important, that help business kickstart their digitalization journey and grew trade revenue through global expansion. Benjamin, if you could just switch on your camera. Welcome to the panel. And finally, we have Vicky. Vicky, who is a co-founder and CEO of NetsMe. NetsMe is a licensed and regulated payment service company based in Indonesia. He has over 2 decades journey in investment banking, entrepreneurship, financial technology. So basically everything under the sun. He's somebody who has done everything. But more importantly, he spearheads the QRES. We'll talk about the QR standards, cross-border initiative. His company has enabled secure, easy cross-border transaction for MSMEs, marking them as one of the key players in driving digital inclusivity and economic expansion in the region. Vicky, welcome to the panel as well. If you could switch on your camera.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we'll come to you in a while for comments as well. I'll start with Laura. Maybe Laura, you want to open with your comments.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to join the panel. Let me share my slides. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you once again for having me at this particular session to have the opportunity to share with you Malaysia's experience in driving an inclusive digital trade. Are you able to see my second slide? Are you able to see my second slide? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you. Let me start by sharing some background about our organization, the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, MDEC. So MDEC was established 27 years ago in 1996 as a one-stop agency to transform and drive our country towards the knowledge-based economy. So 27 years on today, we are an agency under the newly minted Ministry of Digital. And we continue to lead the digital transformation of the country. So our work at MDEC is focused on working alongside public and private sectors to foster the growth of local tech companies, to drive digital adoption, and empowering Malaysian businesses and citizens to play a leading role in the global digital economy. So in my presentation today, I'll share our experience on how we are leveraging on e-commerce to drive a more inclusive digital trade, while also working on promoting interoperability and standardization. So moving on to my third slide. So I'd like to share that for Malaysia, our view is that the initial touch point on digital trade, and for that matter, digitalization, for many of us is e-commerce. And Malaysia has long recognized the critical role of e-commerce in driving the growth of digital economy. And we have therefore implemented this particular roadmap called the National E-commerce Strategic Roadmap since 2017. So what you're seeing on the screen here is our version 2 of the NESR. We call it NESR 2.0. So this particular roadmap has been implemented since 2021 and will take us through to 2025. So basically, this roadmap sets a strategic direction and a whole of nation approach to drive implementations to ensure a more inclusive outcome by aligning a very diverse group of stakeholders across both the public and private sector towards a common vision. And that common vision is for e-commerce to be the engine for catalytic growth for businesses in Malaysia. So this particular roadmap, NSR 2.0, as you can see, is guided by 3 key principles. It's intensify e-commerce adoption and growth. 2, enhance ecosystem development. And 3rd is about strengthen policy and regulatory environment. And these 3 principles are implemented across 6 strategic thrusts. Strategic thrust 1 is about effective e-commerce adoption. ST2 is about capitalizing on export potential. Third, ST3 is on strengthening the fulfillment capabilities. ST4, spearheading innovation. 5, tap the power of data. And 6, improve consumer and seller protection. So the various programs are being implemented across the 6 strategic trusts of NESR, and these programs are listed on this particular slide. Of course, it's too detailed and the font is too small to go through every single one. But what I would like to mention here is that the programs range from training, onboarding, and adoption, and of course, all the way through to fulfillment and how to drive innovation, and of course, the use of Trustmark to strengthen seller protection. So what you're seeing now here is, I'm going to zoom in on 3 of the 16 programs. And these 3 programs are MSME adopting e-commerce under ST1, Malaysia standards on logistics data set for e-commerce transaction and last mile delivery under ST3, and the National E-Invoicing Initiative for B2B Digitalisation under ST5. So very briefly on ST1, why are we focusing so much on adoption of e-commerce? So as mentioned, we have been prioritizing this particular element in NESR, and we have been doing this since even before 2017. So we have a particular attention and focus on adoption because, as I mentioned before, e-commerce is the initial touch point of digitalization for many. And in Malaysia, this is especially the case for MSME and the small businesses. So we have been very successful in this particular area, having touched and benefited over 1.5 million MSME, including the micro and small traders who are in the informal sectors. Of course, beyond adoption, we are also critically aware of the importance of interoperability. Interoperability will drive greater efficiency and productivity, and ultimately reducing cost and lowering the barrier of entry to achieve an inclusive digital trade. So in this, on this topic, I would like to move on to share with you the 2 other programs under NESR, which you are seeing here on the screen. So the next item is the Malaysia Standard on Logistics Data Set for e-commerce. This is a program that is being implemented under Strategic Trust 3 of the NESR. So this is a fairly new standards that was only just approved at the end of last year. It provides guidelines on logistics data sets that are used in e-commerce transactions, and it is open for adoption by players in the e-commerce value chain, such as e-commerce platforms and logistics service providers. So with players across e-commerce value chain adopting this standard, it will seek to enhance efficiency and productivity. And with standards such as these, of course, we are looking at reducing the cost of doing business, and of course, also lowering the barrier for MSMEs to embark on digitalization. So next is the National E-Invoicing Initiative for B2B Digitalization, a program that is implemented under Strategic 5 of the NESR Tap the Power of Data. So again, this is also relatively new for us. It was only approved and announced late last year as well. So we announced the introduction of an interoperable e-invoicing for B2B digitalization, which is based on the PEPAL framework. This particular framework for B2B is being implemented alongside e-invoicing for tax compliance. So I believe Malaysia is the first country in the region to implement both voluntary e-invoicing based on PEPAL and the mandatory e-invoicing for tax. Of course, the mandatory component would come in for those companies who are getting a revenue of over ringgit Malaysia 100 million for a start. And it'll be mandatory for them, I believe, starting sometime July or August this year. So the adoption of e-invoicing based on PEPAL framework seeks to standardize the specifications and message formats for the transmission of electronic invoices. So Abhishek, just now you mentioned that Singapore is also implementing e-invoicing, and I believe Singapore is also adopting the PEPAL framework. So PEPAL has been adopted by more than 20 countries, and Malaysia's adoption of e-invoicing based on this particular framework, we believe will greatly facilitate and contribute to the growth of cross-border digital trade. So of course, the benefit of e-invoicing is immense, but it's especially so in helping to lower the overall cost of doing business and in reducing carbon footprint. So of course, the topic today is about inclusive digital trade. So I'd like to share with you how our MSMEs have contributed to our local economy. So MSMEs play a very vital role and are considered to be the backbone of our local economy. Based on the latest available official data for the year 2022, MSMEs accounted for over 97% of total business establishments in Malaysia. They contributed to about 38% to our national GDP, which is in the area of about Ringgit Malaysia 580 billion. In terms of employment, MSMEs contributed about 48.2% to overall employment here in Malaysia. As for export, they represented 10.5% of total exports in the year 2022, and mainly in the area of manufacturing and a bit in services, and of course the rest is in agriculture. So since I spoke about e-commerce in my earlier presentation, I would like to also share that with MSMEs playing a very significant role in our local economy, e-commerce, this slide shows the e-commerce performance in Malaysia. In 2022, e-commerce contributed to over 13% of our GDP, nearly double from 7.7% in 2016. Consumer e-commerce adoption rose to over 70% in 2022 from about 25% in 2018. In terms of income from e-commerce transactions, you can see from the chart here on the right that Malaysia has experienced accelerated growth from 2017 to 2022. With income having surpassed the Ringgit Malaysia 1 trillion mark in 2021, we are witnessing now that growth rate has since stabilized. And the growth trend here is being exemplified and demonstrated in the form of an S-curve. And on this basis, we are basically seeing that e-commerce has matured and normalized in Malaysia. So the growth trend in Malaysia of an S-curve is also consistent with the findings made by Google, Temasek and Baines in their Economy 2022 report. So the report highlighted that the growth trajectory for e-commerce among urban digital users in Southeast Asia is expected to be in the form of an S-curve, and to quote from the report, after years of acceleration, digital adoption growth is normalizing and e-commerce is nearing full adoption. So with e-commerce having normalized in Malaysia, we are starting to intensify our work in order to optimize the opportunities in digital trade. I will not run through the definition of digital trade because that was covered by the earlier speaker just now. But what I would like to mention is that underpinning digital trade is the seamless and end-to-end movement of data. It is about contributing towards improving efficiency, accuracy, and reliability of transactions across sectors and across businesses. So in driving the growth of the digital trade ecosystem, we are focused, our work here in MDAC is focused on how to achieve and promote cross-border interoperability towards an inclusive digital trade. And we believe that fundamental to achieving cross-border interoperability is the interplay of three key elements. First, technology. Two, standards. Three, a coherent and harmonized legal and regulatory framework. And we also believe that international and regional cooperation, as well as public-private partnership, can play a significant role in order to foster the growth of digital trade ecosystem. So, of course, MDEC, as I've mentioned, we are an agency of the government. We believe that we are well placed to work with organizations such as Access Partnership and, of course, RMIT to shape and influence the development of policies and rules on digital trade in order to facilitate an inclusive cross-border digital trade. So what then is our vision? Is our vision for an inclusive digital trade? So I would like to conclude that we are here to work towards driving interoperability and to achieve greater harmonization of standards and regulatory approach. We would like to work towards and to be able to strengthen the resilience of MSMEs, facilitate trade within and across the border, to bridge digital divide, and of course, is about promoting diversity and digital inclusion. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Great insights, and we talked about some of these points earlier as well about the lack of export from MSMEs, and that's something which we can obviously all work towards. So thanks, Laura. We'll come back to Q&A. But I'll give this floor to Benjamin. Benjamin Tan, as you remember, is the Executive Director for the Association of Trade and Commerce in Singapore. Benjamin, the floor is yours. Let's just, so after you, we'll do have a quick round with Vicky, and then we'll go to the Q&A. Thanks.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Abhini. Yeah, so fellow speakers, panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to speak at this event. Unfortunately, I do not have any slides to present, so let's basically touch onto the topic of digital trade. As we gather here to discuss the profound impact of digitization on our businesses, economy, and society, I aim to shed light on the transformative power of digitization, the opportunities and challenges it poses, and the imperative for us to navigate this digital landscape to be future-ready. Digitization represents a seismic shift in the way we interact, communicate, work, and conduct business. It has reshaped how trans-border trade are conducted and redefined the social fabric of our daily lives. From internet to smartphones and the emergence of blockchain technology to the rise of artificial intelligence, AI, the digital revolution has nothing been short of revolutionary. Amidst the boundless potential of digitization, significant challenges and complexity demands our attention and concerted efforts. One of the most pressing challenges we face is the digital divide, the gap that separates those who have access to digital technologies and those who do not. The rapid pace of technological advancement brings with it a myriad of ethical, social, and economic dilemmas that demand thoughtful considerations and proactive actions. From concerns surrounding data privacy, cybersecurity, to questions about the future of work and the impact of automation on employment, the digital age presents us with complex moral quandaries that require careful navigations and principled decision-making. Therefore, in the realm of trade and business, digitization has ushered in a new era of opportunities, but also disruption. It has enabled companies to reach local and foreign customers in ways previously unimaginable and unlock new sources of value. However, for many micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs for short, the journey towards digitization is fraught with challenges, particularly in global trade. Singapore has 4 active digital economy agreements, DEA for short, covering 9 digital areas that supports local businesses in connecting digitally with their overseas partners in a more seamless manner. The goals of these DEAs are ultimately to lower the cost of business operations, increase business efficiency, and create more seamless and easier access to overseas markets. DEAs are considered an essential part of the digital and green transitions in today's economy, and in international cooperation on digital trade brings along jobs creation, empowering companies, especially MSMEs, to assess new cross-border opportunities and foster innovation. While international frameworks are in place, MSME may face the challenges of not having the know-hows, which impacts their advancement in the global trade. In areas such as cybersecurity, online consumer protection, e-authentication, and paperless trade, the evolving challenges of standardized practices and regulations amplifies the costs and complexities associated with digitization, posing a significant challenge for MSME to compete on the global stage. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us to chart a course towards a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable future. Through government, public, and private collaborations, we can work together to help MSME address the root causes of digital exclusion, bridge the divide, and journey with them, ensuring that the benefits of digitization are shared by all. Therefore, I'm also heartened to share that the Association of Trade and Commerce remains committed to support MSME in their digitization journey. One initiative that is currently in its soft launch phase is our SME digital marketplace, where we help MSME trade online, helping them to kickstart their digital journey. And the SME digital marketplace aims to help MSME amongst government's effort to bring their business online, equipping them with the basic know-hows and future-proofing their business. Therefore, I'm also heartened to share that ATC's SME digital marketplace will complete its soft launch phase and will be launched on 31st May 2024. And I encourage attendees today to join us at the launch event. As we navigate the evolving digital trade landscape, the digital revolution holds immense promise and potential to transform our world for the better. It is through collaborative efforts to shape the trajectory of this transformation in a way that reflects our shared values and aspiration. Therefore, in conclusion, let us embrace the opportunities and challenges, and together we can forge a path ahead, an inclusive, sustainable, and global digital trade. Thank you.
Thanks, Benjamin. Great news, I mean, on the launch, which is happening in a couple of months' time. So thank you. I obviously encourage all participants to join Benjamin for the launch as well. Thank you, Benjamin. I'll come back to you with the questions in a while. But maybe I'll open the floor to Vicky. Vicky Saputra, as you know, who is a co-founder and CEO of NetSME, a licensed and regulated payment service company based in Indonesia. Vicky, the floor is yours for your introductory comments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me for this event. Yeah, but unfortunately, I also don't prepare a specific slide for this discussion, and I also want to apologize because if I turn off the video, the internet connection looks likely is not stable here. So if you don't mind, I will share our thoughts about the digital payment, especially when we are talking about the cross-border. Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Practically, like I have already explained in the beginning, that myself, I'm Vicky. My company is practically we are providing any kind of digital payment solution. At this moment, we are really focusing, especially how to implement QR Indonesia standard. Not only for Indonesian market, but also for the cross-border. The CRIS itself, actually, it was launched by Central Bank since 2019. Ourselves, we obtained the license by 2020, and then we are fully operational, focused on the CRIS itself by 2021. At this moment, we already can serve this CRIS for Singapore, Thailand, and also Malaysia. So all of the MSME, especially for Indonesia, if they want to enable their business to accept or maybe doing any kind of payment cross-border, especially with these three countries from ASEAN, they will automatically can do seamlessly and also definitely with the best rate, because if we are talking about CRIS, the underlying itself is from the local currency transaction that is actually G2G agreement between the country. So the rate definitely the most competitive one. This kind of thing it help MSME a lot, because if we are I think the other panels already sharing a lot about MSME, right? This kind of business actually they have a lot of hassle, they have a lot of issue. So if we are talking about digital payment, they need some like a like a special payment solution that is not difficult, or maybe the onboarding session and everything like that too complicated. Especially in Indonesia, we have like almost 17 million MSME as this moment. And then since the QR Indonesia standard launch in 2019, as per 2023, at least around 30 million of them is already part of the CRIS platform. It's totally different whenever if we are talking about EDC or maybe other payment platform. The growth here is really slow, but when we are talking about CRIS right now is the top trending payment that most of the business, especially the micro and also the small business, using on their daily activity. And hopefully by this year, if everything going well, we also will expand the cross-border payment to Japan and then also for China. I think these two cross-border payment will also help a lot of to boost business for MMSE, especially in Indonesia, way better. I think that's all from me. I will open for any kind of discussion or maybe Q&A, something like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks. So I will. I know, Vicky, your challenges with the internet connectivity. We all have had those issues in the past. So maybe Laura, Benjamin, I would request you back on camera, and we can just open to Q&A. Meanwhile, for participants, you could drop your notes, your questions in the chat room. We look forward to it. And Sushila, great comment on the chat earlier. So Laura and Benjamin and Vicky, maybe I'll just open it with the first question as to we did talk about that standards are critical, all these aspects, but just a quick one would be, what do you think are the specific barriers which are more important, more critical for MSMEs when it comes to adopting or rather looking at digital trade basically? So Laura, maybe you could start by talking about your experience of what are the specific barriers that you believe are most critical for MSMEs.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I would like to mention that as you have heard from my presentation, Malaysia plays a very important focus on e-commerce adoption. And that has been the focus for many, many years. Of course, I've also mentioned that e-commerce in Malaysia, we think it's normalized. Not that it no longer needs, I think normalized in the sense that the ecosystem is mature enough such that MSMEs can readily be onboarded onto e-commerce if they want to. So as e-commerce matures and develops and normalizes in Malaysia, the challenge we feel is not so much about knowledge or awareness on the benefits of digitalization. It is now more about the cost of adoption and the issues that's brought about by what we term as digital fragmentation and digital silos. So by digital fragmentation and digital silo, we meant that while they know how to adopt digital, while they know that digital is important, we are looking increasingly at systems that are separate, that are not able to talk to each other, i.e. Data isn't able to flow, and the absence of interoperability. So, of course, we know that it is critically important where the government, from the standpoint of the government, to drive standardization, to put in place enabling framework that is able to achieve interoperability. We also believe that the innovation lies with the industry. And therefore, we hope that with standardization, more MSMEs can enjoy the benefits of digitalization, and by lowering the costs and of course lowering the barrier. But we also feel that there has to be an increase in terms of public-private collaboration in order to enhance the entire ecosystem. Government do what government does best, and of course the innovation has to be from the perspective of the industry.
Yep. No, I think great point, because the partnership is very, very critical. It can't be just one-way street that government says this is the standard, you follow it, even if it doesn't make sense. So always good to have the cross or tripartite type of arrangements here. Benjamin, your viewpoints on this?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, probably I didn't catch your question earlier.
So it was more about the barriers which you think are very critical for MSMEs when it comes to digital trades.
Right. So I think the key area that I echo what Laura have said earlier, right? In terms of MSME understanding that they need to digitize and all. I think this is something that in Singapore we do see that MSME, they do understand that there is this need to digitize and digitize fast. E-commerce is definitely the first area that how MSME would regard as going on to this digital trade. But there are definitely more than that, right? For instance, in the Singapore government has a number of DEAs like what I've shared in my speech earlier. These DEAs are available for MSME to tap on, but as a matter of fact, it's the kind of collaboration between government and the private sector that enables such DAs to be taken one step ahead. I think that is essentially what can be explored upon. And also for MSME to have that confidence in stepping onto the global trade. I think this is an international effort that through public organizations, we can help MSME grow towards that extent.
Yeah, and in fact, there are some questions in the chat which are coming about this. So I will come back to go back to some of these points, Benjamin. Vicky, your viewpoints on this, given that you are working very closely with MSMEs in Indonesia?
Okay, I think I'm also agree with what Ben has mentioned before. Yeah, practically, this MSME, there are, as far as I know, based on my our effort helping them, I think their biggest issue is their own resource. Because their scale, their own resources, their knowledge, their everything that what they have, since their business also the scale is quite small and something like that. Doing like digital trade like this is quite challenging for them. Definitely to make them to do, even though, for example, like from the payment perspective, from my side especially, using Chris enable them to do the transaction even in the smallest fraction. And then, there's no need like a lot of investment. There's no complication on the implementation and something like that. Still, for them is quite challenging. So support from the private sector and also government is, for example, like what we are doing with, especially in Jakarta, yeah, we have like a collaboration with local government here. We call the program, they call the program itself Jakarta Entrepreneur. So the government has like active support to support the MSME doing their business in the better way. So from the funding side, from the promotion, even for the event, they are also helping them to do like an expo in other country or something like that. So the effort to support this kind of MSMEs, definitely I'm agreed. It cannot be just one party or two party, but at least from the government itself need like a systemic and also like a continuing support to enable the MSME doing their their digital trade and then going scale or something like that. I think that's my.
Yeah. Thanks, Vicky. Laura, Benjamin, if you don't mind, I would ask you to switch on your cameras for the panel as we go along.
Yeah.
And Benjamin, this time I'll start with you on the second question. And I think Jim has raised something similar in the chat as well about what do you think are the digital trade standards that ASEAN member states should implement, prioritize to address some of these difficulties that we talked about? You know, I mean, Jim's question is very similar in the sense that what are some of the standards, including sustainability standards, that MSME should be looking at when it comes to be successful exporters, importers? So Benjamin, I'll start with you on this one.
Right. So I think for MSMEs to embrace digital trade, I think standards like I think Laura mentioned earlier in terms of regulatory legislative standards and all, all these plays a part in determining whether an MSME would actually embark on the digital trade journey, right? While digital trade aims to simplify the whole trade process and at the same time create more opportunities, more trans-border trade opportunities for within the region. I think there are a number of concerns amongst standards, right? That take for instance in terms of digital payments, to your cybersecurity, to data protection. I think these are some of the concerns that MSME would often be worried about, rather than in terms of meeting the standards. Because I think from an association point of view, standards are always agreed upon in the various digital economy agreements, where both countries would come to a common understanding in moving ahead with the digital trade agreements. But on MSME position, it is to the extent on how can they go ahead, providing them with the confidence in moving ahead with their foreign counterpart in this agreement. I think this is something that we should look into, and I think that sums my position on this.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Because one of the things we keep hearing is that standards potentially could exacerbate, the digital divide. They actually create a barrier between so that's why it's very important to identify how to make them inclusive as well. So that's important as well. Laura, your viewpoints on the question about what type of standards we should be focusing on or prioritizing?
What I'm able to share, of course, is from the Malaysia's perspective and our experience. So the two initiatives I highlighted earlier, Malaysia Standards on Logistics Data Set and e-invoicing, are the two key initiatives that we feel would be very important in order to drive an inclusive digital trade. Why e-invoicing? Invoice is one of the most common elements in any trade transactions, be it e-commerce or non-e-commerce, and that is why e-invoicing. And secondly, the framework and the standards that we are adopting is based on PEPAL. Why PEPAL? Because PEPAL is a global standards, and it has been adopted by over 20 countries around the world. And of course, why an internationally accepted standard? Because this will greatly facilitate and enable cross-border trade. So, of course, with PEPAL, as I mentioned, it seeks to standardize the invoice specification and transmission. And therefore, we feel that this will greatly contribute towards an inclusive digital trade because the cost of adoption for MSMEs is actually not so high. And I think in the chat group, there's a question about how the Malaysia Standards on Logistics Data Set was developed and what are some of the challenges that we need to consider. So I would like to share with you the high-level process that I understand on how we have come about with this particular standard. So of course, MDEC being the one-stop agency that drives digital transformation, we are constantly looking out at the best practice that's been adopted in the region and around the world. So we came across this particular area called logistics data set. And what we did was, of course, we approached our national standards body. It's called Jabatan Standards Malaysia. Basically, it means it's the national standards body. It is an agency under our Ministry of Trade Investment. So what we did was the development of this particular standard adheres to the standard and the process of how to develop a Malaysia standards. So this will go through a process of industry consultation, including work and input at the technical working group. So once the standard has been drafted, it will put up for public consultation. And eventually, the final National Standards Committee, before then, it is signed off by the minister. So this is our experience in doing in developing Malaysia standards, and it serves as a guidelines for e-commerce players, the e-commerce value chain, logistics players, and e-commerce platform to adopt. Why do we think this is important? It's important because for any sellers, for anyone who has who are involved in this e-commerce journey, it will mean that it will greatly streamline their process, minimize manual entry, and therefore achieve our objective of ensuring that we can achieve efficiency and drive productivity.
Yep. Thanks, Laura. I think, and I hope you have, Sylvain, you have received the answer for the question that you asked earlier. Vicky, do you have any feedback on this particular question as to what type of standards we should prioritize?
Definitely, my feedback will specifically more on the standard, on the payment side, But for the payment side itself, as far as I know, among the central bank within the country in ASEAN, they, that's why we can do the cross-border using the QR, because they already agreed on the standard. We strongly believe it will be spread out, not only just at this moment, it's only just Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, but we strongly believe soon will be not only this just within these three countries, will be also with other countries. I think that's all from my side.
Thanks, Vicky. I think maybe Vicky, I'll start with you this time for the next question. And the question is about, we talked about these policy initiatives. We talked about some of these standards. We have successfully looked at digital trade standards. How do you think that they have impacted MSMEs in your country, right? Given your context, given your understanding of the thing. And more importantly, how transferable you think are these success stories to other ASEAN member states? So for example, the payment related standards you talked about, curious in Indonesia, do you think that they are easy to adopt and the success story can easily be implemented in other markets? Just to get your viewpoints, Vicky, on that.
Okay, as far as I know, back to the basic, if you're talking about MSME, we cannot expecting them that they can deploy or they can use something that quite sophisticated. As far as I know, if we are talking about any kind of payment channel alternative, QR, I think the simplest way the simplest way in terms of how to adopt, how to implement, how to how to share it with others. That's why QR standard increase itself in Indonesia grow. So the most from in terms of growth, the most the highest growth payment channel. And we strongly believe that this kind of success story, especially in Indonesia, shall be easy to be adopted with other country, because by the end of the day, as far as I know, definitely my perspective, just based on my understanding from Indonesia market, yeah. As far as I know, when I'm helping them to do like a cross-border transaction or something like that, yeah, MSME, especially in ASEAN, yeah, their basic is the same. Yeah, I think using this kind of standard should be easy to be adopted in other countries. I think that's my perspective.
Yeah, I think we did talk about the different principles, and one of them was the ease of access. So that's very important. Maybe Laura, I'll ask you the same question. How do you think from a Malaysian perspective, your experience in Malaysia, how have these standards impacted the policy initiatives, the digital standards impacted MSMEs, especially when it comes to digital trade adoption? And how do you think that success story is transferable to other markets?
We have only the two standards that I mentioned earlier, the Malaysia Standards on Logistics data set and our initiative on e-invoicing, both were announced in Q4 last year. So in terms of our experience on these particular two matters, relatively new, because it was only announced late last year. But definitely based on the interaction that we've had with our stakeholders and the industry, both were very well received. And I think the work for us now is about adoption. Because with critical mass, then we can then see the benefit to be more widespread, because you need more users in order to see the benefits. But that aside, we also know that at the international level, our standards body are also very actively working with their counterparts internationally and also the region in order to set standards that can be adopted across the region. And I believe that G2G commitment to drive conformity assessment and digital standards is extremely important. And I believe that there is now a growing traction during discussions in FTAs to encourage the adoption of international standards that adopt digital trade. And of course, as mentioned by Benjamin earlier as well, it is critically important that we're looking at partnerships and collaboration, whether at G2G level or as between the public and the private sector.
Yep. And in fact, this is one of the questions, I think, based on your feedback. Brian has mentioned something very similar as well in terms of is every country developing their own standards? And you mentioned the G2G collaboration. You mentioned how important it is at an international bodies level to sort of look at it. So the fact whether each country is looking at it differently, or whether are we trying to at least make them interoperable, or looking at global standards which we can buy, ship, pay in like the PayPal, for example. So that I think is a great point, Laura. Benjamin, your viewpoints on the same thing as to what type of, how do you think the Singapore example can be replicated in other markets, given that we always keep hearing the challenge that Singapore has a very unique context and it's difficult to extrapolate that in other member states. So what do you think are the suggestions, any ideas from your side?
Right. I think in terms of pushing our MSMEs to digitize, I think a lot of effort have been done. And MSMEs definitely today in Singapore, I would safely assume that 8 out of 10 of them have they do sell online, they do have their digital presence, and they do trade online, right? So the question is that how are we going to make this shift? Because in Singapore, and compared to our foreign counterparts, I think the success story in our Singapore businesses are there because the kind of policies that are placed may help because of our total MSME size as per compared to our foreign counterparts. But one very good area is the respective on government level that has actually helped MSME is the constant promotion of even we have on SME Go Digital program, etc. which encourages MSMEs to go on board the various nations' digital platforms, right? So that is one areas, and I think that actually can help our MSME to kickstart their journey and to embark on their digital trade in the ASEAN region.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks, Ben. Laura, I'll come back to you on this one. The next question. I think that the fact that we do keep talking about how different stakeholders are important, how we need a more cross stakeholder collaboration here. What do you think are the role of governments, industry players, educational institutions to ensure that we have a supportive ecosystem? You know, what are they doing now? How are you involving them into when the standards are being developed and also adopted?
I think I will go back to what I mentioned earlier. We must recognize that innovations lies with the industry, and no one does it better than the industry. But the government then would have a role to create and facilitate the creation of an enabling environment, an enabling ecosystem. And what does that mean? So one area that the private sector can't do is, of course, the enactment of laws and regulations. So I think that is something that the government should take upon. But of course, the development of laws and regulations, if it's in the area of enabling trade, Malaysia, as with Singapore and Jakarta and Indonesia, we are trading nations. If we are trading nations, it means that our laws must facilitate and enable cross-border trade. So it then makes sense that when we are developing our own laws and regulations, we must take into account and consider what are the best practices around the world. Okay, so I think that's the first one. Second thing is, of course, is about the technical interoperability. Again, to develop standards that can only be used in Malaysia, but would not in any way harmonize with whatever's happening out in the world, also would not be realistic, right? Again, it goes back to our country being a trading nations. So it means that whatever that we do, we must take into account the importance of international development, the importance of DGD collaboration, and of course, because innovation lies with the industry, there must also be public-private partnership. Back to you.
Makes sense. Yeah, thanks. Benjamin, your views on this?
Yeah, I can't agree. You know, to a large extent, I totally agree with what Laura said. Because sometimes government or even association like ourselves, we can't work alone, right? We really have to have the support of each and every one. Government and all the various agreements can be in place, but we also would need the industry and the various businesses to come on board, work hand in hand together with them and journey with them throughout their process. But more can be done in terms of like reaching out to the various MSME and maybe catering a more bite-sized kind of structure for MSME to start embarking on their digital trade, this is essentially what we would always discuss and try to help MSMEs in. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Vicky, your views on this? How have you benefited? And I think there were a couple of questions specifically for you on the chat. I don't know whether you've seen that, but one is about what about QRIS that allowed it to achieve the level of success, and what specific efforts did government and tech companies have to make to expand the adoption? So this is again linked to the question I'm asking the other panelists as well.
You're talking about the successful of adoption for QR in Indonesia, Chris?
Yes, the QR, right? Like what specific effort did government and tech companies like yours make to expand the adoption?
Mm-hmm. So practically what central bank in Indonesia always doing since beginning they are, this standard, they make like a mandatory for any kind of payment company, whether bank or, whether bank or non-bank, they have to adopt it. So it's a mandatory. There's no other payment can be accepted or can be done in Indonesia except the QR itself. And then all of the company that willingness to do like a payment in Indonesia, if they are, if they want to have license, if they want to do this kind of to do this kind of payment, they also need to support not only just for the adoption but also the promotion. So we are doing like a lot of joint promotion. All of the payment company here, they need to support the promotion. So make sure the message that we convey to the audience from both from the merchant side or maybe from the issuing side, they have the same message lah. And then I think here, especially in Indonesia, the government is really really focused on this to make sure the standard can be adopted, especially for the benefit of MSME. Yeah. I think that's what I saw by myself here.
Yep. Okay. Vicky, I think one question was, what is the name of the Indonesian government scheme that you said supports MSMEs?
Pardon? Could you repeat it again?
What is the, so there's a question for you which says, what is the name of the Indonesian government scheme that you said support MSMEs?
Oh, okay. The things that I'm doing at the moment. So as the what I'm doing from next week, we are doing at the moment is it's called Jakarta Entrepreneur. It's a Jakpreneur.
Okay.
Yes, it's a Jakpreneur. Is really focused on the MSME, but at this moment still focusing on all the MSME in Jakarta. Yeah. As per this day, the registered one is almost 400,000 MSME. Yeah, we are still on the progress how to helping them to digitalize from the from the marketing side, from the trading side, and definitely from the payment itself.
Yeah, I hope Jim, that answers your question.
I think you can easily Googling it, Jakpreneur.
Yeah, I share the link. Yep.
Yes.
Thanks, Vicky. I just shared the link with Jim for his reference. I'll just ask one more question, and there are a couple of points which are sort of linked to that. One is, especially given that the technology is moving so fast, especially when it comes to digital technologies, the technology is moving so fast. How do we ensure that the standards remain relevant? I think there's a question earlier from Sylvian as well about do we think that we need to look at for example, the use of AI? Do we think there needs to be a standards at this stage? Do you think this is advisable? So I think the point about how do you keep the standards, digital trade standards relevant in the face of technology advancement? Maybe Benjamin, I'll start with you today. This one.
Yeah, right. So the thing about standards or digital standards, I think it's all it evolves in accordance with the kind of phase of digitization that we are at. As compared to in 10 years ago of the digital standards that are required to be implemented as per today, there's a vast difference with blockchain technology, AI, and all, right? And I think the key area that for digital trade standards to be sustained in the long term, what is being factored in nowadays is in terms of our sustainability transition, right? While we go digital, I think the green and sustainable aspect is also being looked into, that it may also affect standards when we start to introduce standards. So I think what measures should we actually put in place are where do we see AI in the upcoming 5 or 10 years? That it potentially, I would assume that majority of MSMEs today, they are utilizing AI as part of their business process. So how would AI affect MSME, or how would even AI help MSMEs to embark on a foreign market? I think that is something that is of hot topic, and we should deep dive into it. And technology advancement occurs, advances very fast, and I think in order for us to remain relevant, the key areas, we have to constantly look into the key areas, and at the same time to be able to supplement the needs of MSME in the digital trade. And with that, I think we would be quite sustained in the long run.
Yep. Laura?
Yeah, I think I will go back to what I mentioned earlier. Input from industry and working for government to work alongside industry is critically important. And I think once a standard has been developed, it has to be continually enhanced. Again, it has to meet the needs of the industry. But developing standards, as with developing laws and regulations, I believe there are three core principles that you need to adhere to. One is non-discrimination, open source or proprietary, regardless. And number two is also about technology neutrality. It doesn't matter which technology you're using, you have to be able to serve the function. And the third, of course, is about functional equivalence. So I think whether you're developing laws or developing standards, you won't go very much wrong, if you adhere to these three fundamental principles and involve industry as the standards are continually being enhanced. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. I think my personal take obviously is that we are too early, especially when it comes to some of these emerging technologies like AI, to sort of stop their innovation with standards. So we still have to evolve. So that's why we are at ASEAN level coming up with a lot of guidelines to sort of encourage the process of innovation without having, and also have some guardrails around the whole process as well, so that it does not do a lot of harm. So that's the broad idea. So I'll just maybe conclude in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to address one comment which Brian had earlier about adoption of digital process for custom clearance and border process for international trade. There's a lot of paper-based and wet stamp document that are still required. Is there any effort that that to digitize the border crossing processes? Do you know, maybe Laura, based on your e-commerce work that you've done?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Are there any efforts that or to digitize the border crossing process, especially custom clearance border process? Is there any process that which are looking at digitizing that process?
Our current border clearance process is digitalized, and our main agency in driving that particular change is our Royal Malaysia Customs Department. And MDEC, at our side, we have been working very closely with customs. Again, it's about how do we leverage on digitalization to simplify the process. Number one, it's also about advanced alert, just so that submissions can be done beforehand, way before the goods arrive. And number three is also to put in some element of intelligence, such that the audit and the inspection can be done at a random basis without compromising and slowing down the entire process.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Benjamin, anything to add to that?
No, I think I'm all good on my
Okay. Yeah. No worries. For participants, there is a lot of other information. I think my colleague Sonia has put some information there. Benjamin has put the link for the SME Mart launch as well as Devi has put some comments, some elaboration from Vicky's perspective. So thank you very much to everybody for participating. I would like to just maybe conclude our panel discussion with a few points. One is that what we have seen is obviously standards for digital trade are very useful for MSMEs, but we need to ensure that they are fair, they're inclusive as well. So those are some things which I think Laura talked about from the perspective of looking at the basic principles. I think Benjamin talked about how we need to ensure that there is international collaboration among different standards as well, so that when we are trading, it does not add to a lot of cost for the MSMEs as well. And I think Vicky brought up a very important point about how do we ensure there is ease of access for different stakeholders, and the fact that I think in Indonesia they made it standards by default, so everybody had to use a standard to even get onto the payment bandwagon. So I'll thank all of you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Benjamin, and thank you, Vicky, for being on the panel with us. And I'll maybe hand it back to you, Karjun.
Thank you, everyone. And that was thank you, everyone. That was a very exciting panel session, and I've definitely learned a lot from it too. So this brings us to the end of this webinar. Before we close out the session, I would just like to thank everyone again for participating. I wanted to also do a shout out that we will be reaching out after this workshop to everyone for the workshop survey, which is to capture your feedback in terms of what you're looking for future session, what else we could have done better, and just to also take your feedback on any other inputs that you may have for our workshop. And also I'm sharing another link as well, which is our ASEAN-Australia Digital Trade Standard Initiatives website, where we have a lot of resources around digital trade standards, including materials such as the e-invoicing standards that we've been covering across AMS over the past few years. So please feel free to visit and make use of the resources there as you see fit. And that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you everyone again, and have the good rest of your day. Thank you.